Well, good evening. My name is Jeff Pickering. I'm Director of Academic Programs here at AEI, and I'm glad to welcome you all to the American Enterprise Institute for the second installment of our four-part America at 250 Summer Series. This series is part of our Institute's annual Summer Honors Program, AEI's flagship program for undergraduates. In the room this evening are nearly 80 students from colleges and universities across the nation and world who traveled to DC to spend a week studying public policy in seminars led by AEI scholars. This week's seminars are covering a range of AEI scholarship, including tax policy and navigating globalization, our competition with China, our engagements with the Middle East, and the philosophical underpinnings of liberalism and the common good. Leading this week's seminars are tonight's moderator, Yuval Levin, as well as Danielle Pletka, Daniel Samet, Zach Cooper, Alex Brill, and Stan Voiger. For the students in the room, tonight's event serves as the opening dinner for this week's program. July 4th, 2026 will mark 250 years of American independence. It will be an occasion for reflection on the start and present state of our union. This is why our institute, led by Yuval, Adam White, and John Yu, launched an ambitious multi-year effort to celebrate this momentous anniversary by making a contribution to our civic education for years to come. We hold these truths. America at 250 is an 8-volume series of essays from more than 40 eminent scholars on the American Revolution, which aims to reintroduce Americans to the unique value of their national inheritance. It is a remarkable achievement. Across the 4 weeks of this 2026 Summer Honors Program, we've invited contributors to these volumes to take us on a bit of an intellectual journey through the American Revolution. We began last week on June 1st with Lindsay Travinsky of the George Washington Presidential Library at Mount Vernon in conversation with Adam White by situating the revolution in its wider international context. And you can watch that talk and conversation at ai.org now. This week, we turn our focus to the Declaration of Independence and its revolutionary claims with Peter Berkowitz of the Hoover Institution at Stanford University, whose essay is published in the volume titled Democracy and the American Revolution. He will be joined in conversation then with Dr. Levin. The final 2 events of this series will take place just before and just after Independence Day. On Monday, June 22nd, we'll host a panel of the series editors reflecting on the founding broadly. And then on July 6th, we will consider the legacy of the revolution through Abraham Lincoln's invocation of the Declaration. It is poignant that we gather tonight around this democracy volume because this is the book in which carries Gordon Wood's essay. Gordon Wood passed away yesterday at 92 years old. Born in Concord, Massachusetts, he died in Providence, Rhode Island, where he was a professor emeritus at Brown University. Wood is a highly decorated and renowned scholar of American history. AEI awarded Wood our institute's highest honor, the Irving Kristol Award, in November 2025, where he gave, and you should go watch it, a marvelously motivating speech defending the United States as a creedal nation. In his speech, Wood also took a moment to recognize a few other anniversaries 2026 would bring: the bicentennial of the deaths of the 2 founders most responsible for the Declaration, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, and the 70th anniversary of his marriage to his wife, Louise. To honor Wood then, for which it is fitting to revisit again now, AEI produced this tribute.
No student of American history can be considered serious unless they have read Gordon Wood.
I think Gordon Wood's work is more relevant and urgent now than ever, because as we prepare to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the founding, he helps us both to understand why we should celebrate our country, which not everybody sees, and he helps us to see how the ideas that are identified with the American Revolution are related to the actual national experience of the American people. He's a historian with an unusually keen sense of both the power and the limits of political ideas or political theory in the real world.
Wood thinks the ideas are important. Men and women of action seize onto ideas to help them make sense of the circumstances in which they find themselves.
What Wood does is trace this long-term movement of how ideas will hit realities, bounce off the realities, and then move to a different structure of ideas, hit more reality, then move beyond that.
You know, in a way, he's entangled with the American Revolution from the very beginning. He was born in Concord, Massachusetts, like the War of Independence was.
You know, he's got that sort of New England accent, and he writes the way he is. He is just amazingly direct, and he only uses jargon when you absolutely have to.
The striking thing about Wood is that he is a popular writer, but Gordon really is, above all, a scholar and a teacher. He taught undergraduates for 60 years.
You know, when you read Gordon, that you can trust the footnotes. They're fun to look at just because you see the wealth of sources that he has consulted.
His very first book, The Creation of the American Republic, won the Bancroft Prize, which is the highest award you can win as an American historian.
He would pay tremendous attention to the way words would change and the way the American revolutionaries would use those words. Because change is really what the story of creation of the American Republic was about. The American revolutionaries begin their resistance to Great Britain on one set of premises. By the time we get to the end of the revolution, things have turned in an extraordinarily different direction.
To mark the bicentennial of the founding, AEI brought together a group of scholars of American history and American political thought to give lectures in public spaces around the country about different themes involving the founding. It was obvious that Gordon Wood had to be one of these speakers.
The revolution so intensified the people's dominance in politics that there could never thereafter be any escaping from them. In America's new Republican consciousness, there could be nothing else in politics. No orders, no states, no lords, no court, no monarch, not even rulers in the traditional sense, only the people.
And that set of ideas then became a part of his maybe most famous, most important book, The Radicalism of the American Revolution, which won a Pulitzer Prize in 1993.
I think what he did with the radicalism of the American Revolution was remind Americans of just how radical the revolution was. Not in a Jacobin, a Robespierre kind of way necessarily, but in a radically liberal, egalitarian way, that it represents a real line of demarcation from the past.
The most radical thing about the American Revolution, I think, for Gordon Wood, is how it turned into democracy. That it starts out with this almost naive faith in the ancient order of the English Constitution, of kings, of nobles, of commoners, and how it piece by piece abandons that and moves steadily with some blips and some encounters, but moves steadily in the direction of dismantling hierarchy.
What he does is take the criticism that's often launched against the founders for all of Jefferson's high-minded words. In the end, the slaves were still enslaved, and the issue of women wasn't addressed at all. Gordon points out that if Jefferson hadn't uttered the absolute beautiful words that he did, all men are created equal, and if the founders hadn't completely embraced this idea, that there would have been no basis for continuing on as we do today in trying to solve those problems.
And now, to mark the 250th anniversary of the revolution, AEI has again brought together a very ambitious project intended really to create a substantive foundation for civics education in the coming years. And it was perfectly natural that that project had to start in the first session of the first conference we held with a conversation with Gordon Wood.
The Declaration of Independence becomes, I think, the most important document, even more important in some sense than the Constitution, because it not only legally created the United States, but it infused into our culture the highest
aspirations, the noblest ideals of the nation, liberty, equality, the well-being of ordinary people.
I think that he thinks it's absolutely vital that we have a sense, and we meaning all of us, of the national story, of what we're about as a people, of a past that we can be honest about. But to be honest about the past is to admit to the fact that we've done glorious things.
To read Wood is to once again regain a sense of the novelty, and I would even say the excitement, of this American Revolution. A revolution not just in colonial government, a revolution not just in writing documents, a revolution in how you conceive of human society itself.
And that idea is so uplifting and yet so measured and so well backed up in Gordon's books. I just think we should thank him as well as honoring him for the service he has done.
It is almost as though coming up to the 250th, we have experienced a sense of amnesia. We have forgotten the genuine achievement of the American Revolution. And Gordon Wood is here, as he was at the time of the bicentennial, but he is still with us to remind us of what an extraordinary moment this American Revolution was, not just for Americans themselves, but in the history of the world.
This project, We Hold These Truths, America 250, matters because we as Americans, just as we remembered the life and contributions and legacy of Gordon Wood, we need to remember the stories of our nation, to revisit them in all their human complexity, to celebrate our triumphs, and to reckon with where we've fallen short. These volumes and this initiative aim to provide, as Yuval says well, an enduring intellectual product, helping people reflect on how the United States could best live up to its promise and how its people could be more happy, virtuous, free, and safe. Tonight's lecture by Dr. Peter Berkowitz will do this by helping us better see the Declaration, its place in history, and in reviving liberal education in this country. Peter Berkowitz it comes to us from the Hoover Institution at Stanford University, and he is also Director of Studies for the Public Interest Fellowship, who we have many TPIF fellows in the room with us tonight as well. From 2019 to 2021, he served as the director of the State Department's policy planning staff, executive secretary of the department's Commission on Unalienable Rights, and senior advisor to the Secretary of State. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Peter Berkowitz.
Thanks. First, I want to thank Jeff, Yuval, the AEI team for the opportunity to share a few thoughts, brief thoughts on Declaration of Independence at 250. I should also thank my friends from the Public Interest Fellowship who, in a way, serve as a test laboratory for some of these thoughts and opinions. Well, we have a lot of work. They say that familiarity breeds contempt. But as the nation celebrates its 250th birthday, it's not familiarity, but lack thereof that breeds contempt on American campuses for the U.S. Declaration of Independence. The contempt for the Declaration, in particular contempt for the nation's founding principles, emanates from fashionable precincts these days on both the left and the right. Where contempt is not the dominant passion, one often finds apathy or ignorance. Rare is the political science department, or for that matter, a college or university as a whole, that requires students to gain a reasonable acquaintance, a reasonable familiarity with the Declaration. A reasonable familiarity would include study of the traditions from which the Declaration emerged, the Declaration's essential assumptions, aims and argument, its implications for citizenship, its role in the American political tradition, and the appeal of the Declaration's ideas beyond America's borders. The Declaration is central to the American experiment in ordered liberty. The failure of our colleges and universities to teach the Declaration robs you all, America's students, of an appreciation of yours, the nation's precious heritage. And it deprives the nation, the failure to teach the Declaration, it deprives the nation of an informed citizenry. To assist in reclaiming that heritage tonight, small contribution, I want to discuss briefly the Declaration and liberal education, new criticisms of the Declaration, and the Declaration's power to speak across national boundaries and religious traditions. Before they do that, I should also add that Gordon Wood was one of those Americans who truly cherished the Declaration, and we're all in his debt because he taught so many generations of why we too should cherish the Declaration. What I'm about to say is just a few words which in a way distill what Gordon had to say when he was honored by AEI last fall. So the Declaration's achievement. Gordon, and before Gordon, Abraham Lincoln was right. The Declaration of Independence does represent something new under the sun. Never before had a nation been established based on a universal principle, that human beings are by nature free and equal. I was just at a few weeks ago at a conference at Stanford where a very distinguished scholar referred to the Declaration's opening paragraphs as Enlightenment commonplaces. His intention was to disparage them, the sort of opinions that everybody was uttering. First, it was probably a bit early in the Enlightenment to speak of established commonplaces, but in any case, actually, in a way, Thomas Jefferson agreed. He said that the Declaration was intended to give expression to the public sense of the matter in 1776. But even if this was the public sense of the matter, it remains the case that never before under the sun had it occurred to any people or a group of people to establish a nation dedicated to those principles. Now, what are these principles? What are these truths that the Declaration holds to be self-evident? That human beings are endowed with certain unalienable rights, 18th century language for human rights, rights that inhere in you just because you're a human being. That's one of the self-evident truths. The second self-evident truth, according to the Declaration, the primary purpose of government is to secure these rights. Not the only purpose, but the first purpose of government. Third, that the just power of government derives from the consent of the governed. And fourth, if any government becomes destructive of this purpose, securing your basic rights and fundamental freedoms, it is the people's right, the Declaration even says duty, to alter or abolish that form of government and set up an alternative form of government that does the one thing that government is most responsible for, securing your rights. So not only do we have a first, but another amazing achievement. That government, the nation established by the Declaration of Independence, has endured 250 years. Not only endured, but prospered. And I say prospered, notwithstanding serious worries, I think, that we all share about the state of the nation today. But notwithstanding those serious worries, the formidable problems that the nation faces, the United States remains. Check it out. Do the investigation. Consult with Claude. The United States, well, Claude and I may disagree about this, but I'll take Claude on. The United States remains the freest, most tolerant, most prosperous, most powerful, most generous, great power the world has ever seen. Liberal education should routinely, actually at its center, teach what I've just been saying. But generally it doesn't. It's partly because our colleges and universities, maybe not all the ones you attend, or maybe you're here fleeing the ones you attend, I don't know. But in general, liberal education ought to have as its aim educating students for the rights and responsibilities of freedom. Liberal education is not neutral, it's got a purpose. It serves the cause of freedom. Also, liberal education has, or should have, a structure and content. These days, at most universities, you will, for the most part, find distribution requirements. All students are expected to take a few courses in the humanities, a few in the social sciences, a few in the sciences. This is what you all share. Of course, if this is what you all share, you share very little because students can routinely meet these distribution requirements without ever having read a single book in common. But actually, if your purpose is to educate students for the rights and responsibilities of freedom, at the core of your education should be our great experiment in ordered liberty, American political ideas and institutions. But since we didn't come out of nowhere, we come out of a tradition, you should also study Western civilization. And because there are varieties of ways of being human, and to understand your own civilization, you must understand other civilizations, liberal education should require serious study of other peoples and other nations. Liberal education should also be conducted in a certain spirit, curious, probing, rigorous, and always mindful of John Stuart Mill's great dictum that a person who knows only his own side of the case knows little of that. A person who knows only his own side of the case knows little of that. Now, over the years, liberal education, American colleges and universities have debased liberal education in the name of three ideals. Each is a genuine good, each has been taken to extreme. First, contrary to the imperatives of liberal education, we find many professors, many courses devoted to indoctrinating students in the true ideas and the proper causes for young men and women. Liberal education becomes proselytizing education. Keep in mind I said liberal education is not neutral. It's an education oriented toward freedom, but toward partisan political goals. Liberal education should remain silent. Second, our liberal education is bewitched by the scientific method, especially in the social sciences. We take a method that is designed to explain matter and motion, modern science, and we attempt to apply it to human beings. But human beings, unlike atoms, human beings are self-interpreting creatures. We have opinions about right and wrong, good and bad, just and unjust, and those opinions affect our actions. That means that the methods of science will routinely leave out very important features of human life. And they will consign to the sidelines matters like principles, the principles presented in the Declaration of Independence. And finally, our colleges and universities. Even our colleges, we find professors who think that their highest task, actually their only task, is to induct college students into the profession of scholarship, instead of introducing students to American ideas and institutions, the treasures of Western civilization, and other people. So, an education driven by these three ideals, political one, a methodological one, and a professional one, is one that produces graduates generally ignorant of the Declaration of Independence, enduring principles, and inspiring legacy. So, the situation, it turns out, is even worse, because while the general tendency of liberal education is to leave students ignorant about the Declaration, we live in a time in which we see schools of thought that have arisen, which are actually devoted to repudiating the principles of the Declaration of Independence. How did this come about? There's many factors. I want to emphasize one. Our tendency to equate thinking with critical thinking. Have you ever heard this term on campus, critical thinking? It's usually the form of thinking that your professors want to encourage in you. Now, of course, all thinking includes a critical component. Stepping back, holding established beliefs, practices, and institutions up to standards, determining how they fall short. But critical thinking is only one part of thinking. There's another part of thinking. For the time being, let's call it generous thinking. It's devoted not only to understanding how established beliefs, practices, and institutions fall short, it seeks to understand what needs they meet, what purposes they serve, what goals they underwrite. Without generous thinking, critical thinking becomes nothing but denunciation and excommunication. Speaking of which, here are two schools of thought in the modern university, in the contemporary university, that teach explicitly contempt for the principles announced in the Declaration of Independence. Let's call the first camp postmodern progressivism. According to the postmodern progressives, America is rife with systemic oppression based on, there's some differences here, race, sex, in class, or you can take the whole bag and say race, class, and sex converge in creating a nightmare world in which oppression based on race, class, and sex converge in creating a nightmare world in America. And the postmodern progressives add that this oppression derives from the principles announced in the Declaration of Independence. They disguise, they buy off, they co-opt people from recognizing the truth about the oppression that is actually inscribed in our deepest beliefs, practices, and institutions. Strangely enough, we also have a school on the right today, the post-liberal right. According to the post-liberal right, America is rife with systemic moral and political corruption and decadence, stemming, you guessed it, from the nation's founding principles. Actually, here there's a bit of a divide on the post-liberal right. Some post-liberals say that American principles themselves are the cause of our moral corruption and decadence. You'll find this argument developed in a book called Why Liberalism Failed. But there's another view on the post-liberal right. You'll find this in a book called Common Good Constitutionalism, that we've made an error for the last 250 years in supposing that the country was founded on Lockean principles, on principles that define the modern tradition of freedom. In reality, America was founded in devotion to the classical legal matrix, which is constituted by Aristotle, Cicero, and Thomas Aquinas. This is not, by the way, for a moment to suggest that Aristotle, Cicero, and Thomas Aquinas are not of the utmost importance to students of politics and students of America. But they were not, I believe, a triumvirate that decisively informed the thinking of our founders. But what you see in the postmodern progressives and in post-liberal right is something of this rage to criticize and condemn whole, to repudiate, that I think in part springs from an over-reliance on the idea that the essence of thinking is critical thinking. It's a part of thinking, but we also need generous thinking, the kind of thinking that is capable of, as Mill said in another context, discovering the neglected truth in long-standing beliefs, practices, and institutions. Since time is short, I will now mention, but just very briefly, some reasons I have for thinking that the Declaration of Independence is not only an asset in American politics, domestic politics, but it's an asset in U.S. foreign policy. This brings me to a project that I worked on when I was in the State Department. It is the report of the Commission on Unalienable Rights. This is a report that was commissioned by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo because he was deeply concerned by what he regarded as the abuse of human rights in not just American politics, but in foreign policy in general. What was the abuse? Well, there was, in his judgment, the politicization, his judgment, our judgment, the politicization of human rights organizations, and in general, the use of human rights as a vehicle for advancing a political agenda, a progressive political agenda. As a conservative, Pompeo was deeply opposed to what he regarded as this abuse. But Pompeo was unusual. At the time, and I worry still today, many conservatives conclude that human rights are nothing but a progressive political agenda. They are the progressive political agenda in disguise. So to be a conservative is to reject human rights. Pompeo understood that matters couldn't possibly be so simple. He liked to tell the story how as a cadet, a new cadet at West Point, he received a copy of the Federalist. That copy of the Federalist contained the Constitution and the Declaration. He read the Declaration and he realized unalienable rights. That's 18th century language for the rights all human beings share. That is, to be a conservative, one who cherished the American tradition, wanted to both conserve it and improve it. One couldn't dismiss human rights. One couldn't reject them, merely progressive. They are inscribed in the nation's very founding. He created a commission to help recover, let's call it the original understanding of unalienable rights, to examine the role of these rights in the American political tradition, and to give some thought to the role of human rights, the rights the Declaration proclaims in responsible U.S. foreign policy. Don't have time to discuss any more about the report, except to say that about 2 or 3 weeks after the report was published in the summer of 2020, I received an email from an advisor to the general chair of Nahdlatul Ulama. What is Nahdlatul Ulama? It is the world's largest independent Muslim organization, 100 million followers strong, headquartered in Indonesia. And they wrote to say, we greatly admire the State Department's new report. We are a school of Islam that emphasizes rights, toleration, and human dignity. What you've given expression to within the American tradition is something we are trying to defend based on the Islamic tradition. Please come to Jakarta and present your report. And in fact, Pompeo did travel in October 2020 to Jakarta to present the report of the Commission on Unalienable Rights. And I will just say here that some of us on the Commission remain in touch with Nahdlatul Ulama. To bring remarks back home, it seems to me that if the principles of the Declaration of Independence can appeal to 100 million Muslims halfway around the world in Indonesia, there's a chance, a decent chance, a respectable chance, that those principles can furnish a common ground for repairing the rifts among American citizens. In saying this, I am reminded that for that to happen, we need a liberal education that provides students an introduction, a serious understanding of the Declaration. And that brings me back to Thomas Jefferson. In 1778, Jefferson presented a bill for the more general diffusion of knowledge. In the preamble to that bill, he envisaged talented and high-minded students. He said, the talented and high-minded students, I quote now, should be rendered by liberal education worthy to receive and able to guard the sacred deposit of the rights and liberties of their fellow citizens. The highest job of liberal education. It's in that spirit, I trust, that you all will take excellent advantage of the opportunities afforded by this AEI Summer Honors Program to render yourselves worthy to safeguard American citizens' unalienable rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter. Wonderful way to get us going here. I wonder if we can begin our conversation where you started and ended, which is with the connection between the character of a liberal society and the character of, we might say, a university. I wonder why you and Thomas Jefferson, and not only the two of you, but those are a notable duo, seem to think that there's something important about higher education in the formation of democratic citizens, that somehow there's a need for a certain kind of university education for a free society to sustain itself. Why is that, and what is that kind? Why did Jefferson found a university? Why did Washington want a national university? They never expected that everyone would go, but what was the sense they had of why this might help?
I think it starts with the recognition that complying with the requirements of a free society and upholding the institutions of a free society doesn't come immediately to us or easily to us. Like so many good things, it requires habituation, discipline, training, in education. In fact, I don't want to go too far with the thought, but many of the achievements we aspire to, whether it's sports or music or the arts or in the interpersonal realm, it requires discipline in education. So why should citizenship in a free society be any different? It is one more activity, very important activity, for which we require education. Of course, a specific education, just to make clear, that education doesn't begin in college. College is the capstone. It starts with acquiring good habits at home, and it begins in schools with reading, writing, and arithmetic.
How do you think about how we could get there from here? You describe a situation that doesn't seem like it's Jefferson's ideal, but it is our reality, and if it's true, and yet the ideal is what it is, where would you start? What would you do now?
Today, in present circumstances? I'd institute about 1,000 more programs like AEI Summer Honors Program. I would scale it. That actually is a serious suggestion. But what lies behind it is a belief that a problem is very serious and it's still not well understood. I suppose there's been the public has perceived a crisis on American campuses since roughly, not really COVID, but since the outrageous conduct following the October 7th massacres in Israel by the Hamas jihadists. The public then saw, we've got serious problems with, astonishingly serious problems with professors and students celebrating massacre and wanting to actually globalize the Intifada, what's going on campuses. So we're beginning to understand that we've had a problem. This problem has a history. To attentivize, it's clear that this problem has been growing for many, many decades. But that's a start. Recognize that you've got a problem. But on universities, I don't think they have begun to fully grapple with the extent of the problem. I think on the universities, academic leaders largely think that the problems are partly a problem of messaging, partly a problem of a few bad actors. But from my point of view, the problems run deep. How deep? I think we have relatively few people on campus in the administration or among faculty who are capable of articulating the case for free speech. I think we have very few colleges and universities who, in my judgment, have anything like a respectable curriculum. From their point of view, education is a smorgasbord, and the only way to respect your freedom and your uniqueness as human beings is allow you to take whatever the heck you feel like taking as students and to devise your own curriculum. Any of you here devise your own concentrations or your own majors?
Who's going to admit that now?
Yeah, who's going to admit that now? I did. But I don't entirely approve of it. Actually, that's not true. What I mean is, if it were actually based on a common foundation, we would all be much better off. And in my experience, students who are exposed to a common foundation, the best such program I know, at least at the elite level, is directed studies at Yale University. The students who come out of that program celebrate it in part because they're studying great works that spark their moral imaginations, help them think better. But they like it also because it builds friendships. It provides a basis for conversation, and to mention a theme that I know is dear to Yuval's heart, because they have read these books in common, because they have ideas in common, they can much more effectively express their disagreements and learn from one another. So we haven't fully, I think, grappled with the extent of the problem. Once we do, I would encourage more programs like this, programs like the Public Interest Fellowship, new developments within our great public universities, like I hear there's one or two people here from the Hamilton School at the University of Florida. Good for you all. We should, and we should also work from within our established universities. In other words, in my judgment, the problem is so serious that it would be a mistake to settle on one arena in which to deal with the problem of liberal education. I say we have to operate more summer programs, more civic thought programs at the public universities, more internal reform, more series like the one that you and your team edited.
So you made a case for generous thinking and not just critical thinking, and a warning about the dangers of contempt for the Declaration from the progressive side and from some on the conservative side too. Think generously about those critics. What are they right about? Where do they start from that makes sense, and where do they go wrong?
Yes. So each begins from a respectable moral impulse. So you could say that it goes wrong pretty early in some of these cases, but nevertheless, it's a very important question you ask. Let's start with the postmodern progressives. In a way, I will apply Mill's analysis of Bentham and Coleridge here. Our laws, our policies, always in general fall short. It is the very nature of policy. Moreover, our principles, our commitment to equality in fundamental rights makes us especially alert to claims of oppression, to claims of unfair treatment, to claims of discriminating on people based upon some irrelevant characteristic. Our postmodern progressives, and I say postmodern here because they believe the critique goes all the way down, and in effect, they want to repudiate the Enlightenment, their words, which I'm repeating here. So I think they go wildly too far, and I think also they fail to appreciate the extent to which they are actually being motivated. They are motivated by the principles they wish to renounce, Enlightenment principles. This goes, by the way, for the 1619 Project. What is the 1619 Project if not a cry from the heart for an America that, they don't put it this way, that more fully respects the equality of all? They can't put it that way for various reasons. But so that commitment, the anti-oppression commitment that I believe is inscribed in our documents. What about the post-liberal right? Well, I said that they attribute the moral corruption and decadence they see all around them to our fundamental principles. They're not wrong that there is an abundance of moral corruption and decadence all around us. It's not all that there is out there. As I said, the freedom that America continues to protect, the generosity that we show me another multi-religious, multi-racial, multi-ethnic society that's done as good a job. Moreover, I also say, in response to our post-liberal friends, we live in a vast country. I flew across it not 24 hours ago. I had a window seat. Most of our country is still empty. If you want to create a small, tight-knit society devoted to your understanding of the highest good, there are opportunities to do it. And there's much more one could say in defense of the United States, but to pinpoint the answer to your question, what they get right is a serious concern about moral corruption and decadence. Their solution or their response, in my view, goes off the rails.
there's a debate now, as you know, about how we ought to think about the character of the American people as a people. A debate roughly between the argument that fundamentally what makes Americans Americans is a commitment to the creed, as the Declaration lays it out, and the idea that what makes Americans Americans is a shared history, or even in some people's view, a kind of shared heritage. How do you think about the debate? How do you understand the two sides? Where do you find yourself when you hear this argued out?
I think of a essay that my Hoover colleague Victor Davis Hanson wrote many, many years ago, which had a title, I don't remember the exact title, but was something like Abandon the Divisive Force of Either or, and or either or, and embrace the healing powers of both and. In other words, it seems to me crazy to be forced to choose between those two constitutive features of what it means to be American. Of course, we are a propositional or creedal nation. But of course, also we are a nation with a distinctive history, set of traditions, language, and so on. How do they work together? A quick observation that comes from an impeccable source, an Uber driver. But I've heard versions of this on many occasions, and I can give scholarly references in support of what I'm going to say, but most immediately from an Uber driver. This guy, nearing 70, he's from Iran, and he fled the Ayatollahs about the same time as his brother did. His brother landed in Germany. He ended up in the United States. And he was explaining to me that his brother tells him that his children, who are now adults, and he fears that his grandchildren, his children's children, they're just never going to be fully Germans. They're formal citizens. They don't quite fit in. They're not allowed to fit in by their German fellow citizens. What did his brother tell me about America? He said, I'm telling you, it's amazing. Me, he said, I'm an immigrant, I know, I speak with an accent, but my children who were born here, never, not for a moment, did they think of themselves as anything but Americans. It was instant. And their grandchildren, it will be as if, he might not have said this, but it was in the spirit, it was as if Thomas Jefferson were a forebear. But that's right. Now, you can become an American like that in part because of the principle on which the country is based. And the principle, of course, is not separate from the political institutions that instantiate it. It's not separate from the popular culture that has grown up around it. The popular culture has many defects, many appalling aspects of it, but it also does teach in a variety of ways that actually all of us human beings are equally endowed with unalienable rights. It doesn't use that language, but it teaches us that in 1,000 ways.
I'm going to open things up for questions very soon, so think about what you might want to ask Peter. Before I do that, I want to ask you about your sense of the kinds of concerns that students now have on this front, and we'll hear some in a minute. But you've been teaching for a long time. You've seen students change, I suspect, over time in some ways. What's distinct about this moment from your point of view in terms of the civic concerns, the political concerns of your best students?
First, I'll make a comment about the Public Interest Fellowship, which I have been connected with now for more than a decade. And this is a group of conservatives, old-fashioned conservatives, When we launched the Public Interest Fellowship in 2015, the routine foil in our conversations was the left. Over the years, maybe with every year a little more, we find ourselves constantly debating internal debates, fissures within the right. That's a change. I notice from the conservatives that I deal with that I meet. Did I say deal with? I guess I did. The conservatives that I meet and deal with and teach at Stanford, and I think they are similar to conservatives at other elite institutions. There's a great deal of sympathy for the post-liberal right. But this, of course, is a radical right, a right that demands fundamental and comprehensive transformation. So I suppose one difference, at least let's say over the last 10 years, is a fading, an additional fading of a conservatism that regards its most urgent task of conserving the American experiment, which, as you know well, you've written about, is inseparable from also improving the American experiment. So this is a big and worrisome change. And I'll add this, if I go all the way back before my teaching days to my student days, in those days, you actually could almost worry that familiarity, almost, but not quite, that familiarity would breed contempt for the Declaration. You can't worry about that today. We're so either unfamiliar with it or to the extent that we talk about it. And by the way, so I'm going to mention this because Gordon Wood is on all of our minds. By the time Gordon Wood retired from the history department at Brown, undoubtedly one of the nation's greatest historians. He was regarded by his colleagues, not because of his age, but because of the kind of work he did, as not just a relic, but an unwelcome relic. That's been building for some time. So I guess the biggest change, which is not a fundamental change, it's a change that's been unfolding for decades, and we need to become more familiar with this history, is an increasing forgetting of what it means to be liberally educated, and a forgetting of how, to go back to your first question, of how important that is to maintaining the American experiment.
Is there a way that marking the 250th could help to change direction here? What would it look like to do this well, to do this year in the right way?
Well, we're about halfway through the year. I wish there was a lot. First of all, AEI has punched above its weight, done all you could ask from an organization and more. But the Trump administration has done very little, actually. Just give one example, one that's close to my heart. Why are there not, well, now a foreign policy point and then a domestic policy point. Well, why is the administration not arranging a series of events at embassies around the world celebrating the achievement of the Declaration of Independence and celebrating America's achievements 250 years into the American experiment? I myself have, on the one hand, I've been happy to see the Trump administration take on universities that have been discriminating based on race and have been coddling anti-Semites. On the other hand, the administration has proceeded with a much too clumsy and heavy hand. But the administration has done very little to encourage citizens to return to the Declaration, to think about our debt to the forebears, to think about the continuing relevance of these principles. So to some extent so far, it has been a missed opportunity, but okay, that releases none of us from our job in doing what we can in our small spheres to recover an understanding, share this understanding, and keep talking about it.
Let's take questions. I think there will be microphones going around. Okay, since Henry's back there, why don't we start in the back? Sure. Tell us who you are, where you go to school, and a quick question.
Hi, thank you so much for speaking. I'm a rising sophomore at Princeton right now. And so I was just wondering, I think a lot of the issues you brought up about education are certainly pertinent to our time. But also, I think the decline in reading that we see in our generation is particularly problematic, not just in maybe reading the Declaration and reading these great works of the American founding, but also in great fiction as well. And I think all these classes that we might talk about as being required, maybe requiring the Declaration and things, are great. But if no student has a curiosity to read them and really discuss the ideas, I don't know just how effective they might be. That's not a challenge, just a general thought about the decline of reading and curiosity among our generation, and if you have any thoughts about that in particular.
As it happens, I have a thought. How many students in the entering class at Princeton?
Roughly 1,500.
If the Princeton admissions office can't find 1,500 students, you guys probably admit 1 out of 20? Roughly 1 out of 20. If the admissions office can't find students who can read a book, they can find them among the 18 who've been rejected. I take seriously the problem of boys and girls, young men and women growing up on digital media and having their capacity to read, to concentrate, diminished. Understand that. But Princeton can do something about that. It can actually offer classes that demand students read. And if the students don't read the book, the professors can fail them and kick them out of the universities. Princeton will not go down. Princeton is one of the richest universities in the country. And like I said, I'm very confident among the 18 out of 20 that are rejected, there are some who are very smart and who can read. Your lacrosse team might suffer. Your basketball team might suffer. But the university can handle that. By the way,
Some lacrosse players can read. Just
yes, right.
I'm familiar with a few.
Yes, thanks. Yes.
Let's take another question.
Slur on lacrosse players.
Let's go up front here, if we can reach. I think he's coming that way. Sorry, Henry.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for speaking with us today. My name is Christina. I go to the University of Florida. I'm actually at the Hamilton School.
Wonderful.
And so my question is related to your qualms with liberal education. I mean, they've been around since around the 1960s, but many prominent conservative thinkers who share your views, including Alan Bloom, have kind of admitted that liberal education is sometimes exclusive to elite institutions. I'm pretty sure he actually said that state schools are meant to just prepare students for vocational trades. And so I was wondering what you think about that. Where does the balance lie between having great engineers and having great thinkers?
Once again, both and. We need great thinkers, and we definitely need engineers. The idea of liberal education, by the way, is not to make everybody a great thinker. The idea of liberal education is not to prepare you to become a scholar. It's to fit you for citizenship. So it's great, by the way, if engineers read literature and read history. Bloom may have made that dismissive remark about state universities, but let us deal with the reality today. We have great flagship universities like the University of Florida, Gainesville, the University of Texas, Austin, and others. These universities perform a variety of functions. They provide pre-professional training. They train scientists. They provide a credentialing mechanism. I don't see any reason why not, and I see a lot of reasons why they should also provide liberal education. It may not be available for everybody, but in a way, the University of Florida has recognized this. They've created the Hamilton School, on whose board I sit, by the way, although I don't do anything there. I don't.
It's the best kind of board.
Yes, I'm just a pretty face there. Yes. So they have created a school within this massive university. I think there's 60,000 students altogether, something like this?
Yeah, 50,000.
50,000, okay. I see nothing inconsistent with the public university's mission to create a small school that will cater to students who are disposed to and capable of studying American ideas and institutions. Again, I don't want them all to go off and become scholars. Let them feed into the general population, become well-educated lawyers, doctors, business executives, teachers, whatever. So, and I think were Bloom around today, I suspect he would celebrate the Hamilton School for Classical and Civic Education and not deplore it. I suspect.
Let's take a question there.
Hi, Dr. Berkowitz. Thank you very much for being here with us.
A plant?
Yes. Yes.
It seems that the education you're describing is maybe not a liberal education, but a civic education. And I was wondering why should liberal education not be pointed more towards truth and something higher rather than just merely becoming a good citizen?
Yeah. Let's begin with the name, liberal. What does it come from? A word meaning freedom. It's an education for freedom. Now, it turns out in a free society like ours, a liberal education, at least in my view, is a civic education. And it is, in its way, a very important way, pointed toward truth. Liberal education is not about lies. It's not about myths. It's not about ideology. But I happen to know, or I can reasonably guess, that you are drawing a contrast between liberal education and, let's say, Socratic education. And Socratic education is, in the pure case, it really is devoted to, this is the motto, or was, for the University of Austin at Texas, the fearless search for the truth. But that is, in the first place, not what liberal society needs. In the first place, it needs people with the qualities of mind and character and the knowledge capable, that renders them capable of sustaining the institutions of a free society. Now, when they're studying, especially in ethics and politics, and they pick up Mill or Hobbes, he's a 17th century philosopher. You may have heard of him. No, it's a joke, but sorry. Noah gets it. Or Thomas Aquinas or Al-Farabi. The question should be, first, what are the arguments they're making, and are they true? But again, the first priority is equipping students to understand the kind of political society in which they live, and equipping them with the qualities of mind and character, which includes toleration, civility, curiosity, a lively moral imagination, the ability to think critically and generously. From my point of view, that is the true civic education. And so I should add, I suppose, what we today call civic thought is actually just part of civic education. Yeah, it's very important that citizens of a free society know how a bill becomes a law. I would love it if more colleges and universities required some healthy dose of the Federalist. But from my point of view, you haven't got a proper civic education in a free society unless you've also studied American literature and European literature and classical literature and the literature of another people. So for me, the full liberal education is civic education. It involves a commitment to the truth, but you might say it still falls short of the Socratic quest for wisdom, and I would accept that.
You would accept that. That's interesting. There's a way today that orthodoxy is so unorthodox that the distance between Socrates and Cicero is really narrowed.
Yes.
That to be orthodox today in your political views, in your religious views, in your kind of venerating the past is to be very unusual.
Yes.
And Cicero would be executed for corrupting the youth in this situation.
All true, but I will add this. Look at the Platonic dialogues. I can't remember the themes of all of them, but typically they raise and explore questions. What is justice? What is courage? What is love? What is piety? What is Athens is not one of them. Mm-hmm. The history of Athens and Athenian political institutions is not one of those questions. The closest they come is to studying or forbidding the study of the poets. Yeah. At the end of the day, some of us think Plato Socrates brings his students, or tries to bring his students back to civic responsibility. But it is not meant to disparage Socrates, far be it from me to disparage Socrates, to suggest that nevertheless, liberal education is not identical. Yeah. But if I may just add one other point, still, I do think that if, because of the strange times in which we live, if some people out there who love Socrates and have a low opinion of John Stuart Mill were to study Mill, especially his great inaugural address as the rector of the University of St. Andrews, if they were to read this, they would be astonished by how much admiration Mill has for Plato and Aristotle and Greek wisdom.
Mm-hmm. I think of the circumstances of students today, it reminds me of the scene from The Life of Brian, which they won't know, but
I'll know.
This wonderful scene from Monty Python where there's a crowd gathered in front of a palace, and the speaker up in the balcony is trying to get them to go away, and he says, "You don't have to listen to me. You're all individuals." And the crowd says in one voice, "We're all individuals." And this one guy in the middle says, "I'm not."
Yes.
And that is roughly the place of the conservative student on today's campus.
Indeed.
Let's take another question.
It is.
Right up here in the front, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I am actually an engineer and liberal arts student at the University of Texas at Austin. So
terrific.
There you go. But I was having a conversation earlier with somebody at AEI, and one of the points they were kind of making is that there isn't much perpetuating the process of the continuation of American civic values. In particular, they were talking about the example of any kind of assimilation into U.S. culture.
Any kind of
assimilation.
Yeah.
Into U.S. culture. And so I just wanted to push back a little bit, because you gave the example of the anecdote of the Iranian man who feels welcomed into American culture, but you also admitted that much of American culture today is just consumed by digital dopamine and stuff like that, rather than a continuation of
dopamine. I like that.
American civic tradition. Yes. So do you have any more optimistic examples of how in culture America is actually continuing its civic tradition beyond a couple of like SEL and the Hamilton school?
When you say continuing its civic tradition, do you mean reforms to respond to what some regard as a crisis, or do you mean how we live in general, how we live our lives as Americans today?
More so the latter. Just the continuation of yeah, like you said, the what it means to be a good citizen in America.
Well, most Americans still go to sleep at night, not fearing pounding on the door. The door is going to be ripped open. They're going to be ripped from their bed and thrown in jail for this crime or that. Most Americans, certainly you're at the University of Texas, Austin? Longhorn, sorry. Yes. Most of you, how many students at your university?
Roughly 40,000.
40,000, okay. Most of you choose your own friends. Most of you practice your religion without too much fear. Maybe somebody mocks you in a class. Most of you, without even thinking about it, are planning on choosing your own spouse or choosing not to have a spouse. Most of you are thinking right now about what kind of career to pursue. And the principal constraints that you face are the market, AI. The constraints are not authority, government authority, religious authority. In other words, most of you, I didn't even mention the quality of the food you eat or your athletic facilities at the University of Texas, but never mind those. Most of you enjoy a kind of freedom that has been almost unimaginable to most of humanity most of the time. By the way, none of this is intended to negate the idiocy of much of our popular culture. None of it's meant to deny the dysfunction of our political class. None of it's meant to deny that we, in some ways, we continue to fall short of our founding principles. But we are still, in large measure, one of the great opportunity societies of all time, even as we confront very serious problems. And as Glenn Loury points out, we have actually more or less, and many decades ago, eliminated discrimination as a legal matter. Now, it came back with reverse discrimination, but denying historically discriminated against minorities their rights based on a race or ethnicity or a non-minority, a majority women, we ended that a long time ago under law. All of these are real achievements. We should recognize them as real achievements, and they should increase our motivation in saving the country from the large, if not enormous, challenges we face.
Let's take one last question. Henry, maybe back there wherever you find one. We'll treat people equally.
Hi, I'm Max from the Australian National University. I've got a pleasantly simple question, which is, where did rights come from? Which is a particularly vexing question in Australia, because despite the fact that our founding fathers were explicit in how they were inspired by the American founding fathers, an Australian can't point to a piece of paper that says you've got these rights in the same sense that an American can.
Yes. Well, just to be clear, our piece of paper makes clear that our rights don't come from that piece of paper. Our piece of paper, the Declaration, parchment, makes clear that it identifies two sources of those rights. Nature's God. But our declaration also says something, uses this provocative formulation. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Why is that a provocative formulation? Well, normally when we say we hold something, we're saying, this is my conviction or belief. Normally when we're talking about something that's self-evident, we say, it's apart from your own conviction. The shortest distance between 2 points is a line. It would be a bit odd in English if we said, I hold that. No, you can observe it. We can't think about it in any other way. So, first point, our document says our rights come from nature or from God. But second point about we hold these truths to be self-evident. This was Jefferson's point in a letter he wrote in 1825. He said, in the Declaration, we were not trying to do anything new. We were not introducing a new thought, a new principle. We were describing the common sense of the matter at the time. America was lucky because this notion was already widely shared. Now, it mattered that a widely shared notion was inscribed in a political document, was formalized. It helped organize thinking. It helped the framers of the Constitution, who had an understanding of what the larger purposes of government should be and what they should not be. So when you're saying we haven't got a written document, maybe, well, you do have a constitution. Okay. So maybe I'll just then add one other point. The Declaration of Independence is not a legal document in the sense that you can't effectively appeal to it in a court of law. In other words, you can't bring a lawsuit in the United States and say that he or she or the government is invading my unalienable rights, even though the very purpose of government is to secure them. Constitutional rights, yes, and the constitutional rights are designed to protect your unalienable rights. So, yes, I agree it's a disadvantage not to have a document that states this so clearly, but I presume there's nothing in Australian law that would prohibit the people getting together and issuing an affirmation. In fact, to come back to a point I was making, one of the purposes of the report of the Commission on Unalienable Rights was actually to invite other peoples, other nations, to do what we had done in the United States in 2020. That is, return to their own political traditions, their national traditions, their moral traditions, even religious traditions, and find within those traditions resources, moral, intellectual, philosophical resources, for affirming the principles that all people share. It's because you do have this. I believe that Australia is a signatory to or voted to approve the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So your government can create an independent commission. I'm sure Mr. Pompeo would be glad to consult with you and discover within your traditions moral resources for making that important affirmation.
Peter, thank you very much. Please join me in thanking Peter Berkowitz.
Thank you.